Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and I just want to thank everyone out there for tuning in each week, for smashing that like button, sharing, reviewing. We have now, as of this morning, we are now being subscribed to in 1,400 countries. I was really excited to get to that 1,400, and as of this morning, that's where we are. So, and it has everything to do with people like you, all you Bamboo Pack members, as well as the amazing guests like I have on today. So I want to start off by reading a quick heart letter, and this came in regarding a podcast episode that we shot on Tuesday, and as of this date, it has not been aired yet, but it was shared with a few people, and the guest, Brandon Haig, got this response back, and he shared it with me. He said, "Congrats on a great podcast appearance. Your insights on achieving goals and focusing on what's in our control provide valuable takeaways for us all. Thanks, Brandon and Brian, for doing the podcast." So thank you, listener. We appreciate that. But I want to get into today's guest because I've been pretty excited to interview her. We have Paige Elizabeth on here today. So I'm going to read her bio, and then I want to let you hear her wisdom, her stories, and her experiences. So Paige is an author and a personal success and lifestyle coach. She works one-on-one with individuals. She uses her intuitive ability to spot the variables that keep her clients stuck, thus enabling catalytic growth through challenging their current paradigms and holding them accountable in the process of mastering change. And I think as you get to know her, you're going to realize she probably doesn't have a difficult time holding people accountable. Paige works with individuals in a range of areas from relationships to personal growth and entrepreneurship. She travels domestically and internationally as a keynote speaker and teacher, relaying to her audiences the proven methods and topics that are found within the pages of her amazing book. So, folks, I have a copy of her book here. It's called Leading an Intentional Life. Unlearn Your Pain, Rewrite Your Story, and Create Your Dream. It's an amazing book. It is one of those books where, I bought it because I knew Paige was coming on. I had no expectations, and I started reading it just a few days ago. I'm 85% through it, and every single page, literally every page, has highlights, notes, underlines, dog tags on the tops of the pages. So we're going to go through some of her wisdom in here today, but I'm going to have a link in the show notes so you can jump right on and order it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. But I would highly, highly recommend her book, Leading an Intentional Life. You'll thank me later. All right, without further ado, Paige Elizabeth, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you, Brian.
Paige just got back from Vegas, so Paige is calling us from Florida today. Are you in Miami Beach?
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale. Well, we're experiencing a storm up here today, Paige, in the upper part of Michigan. We're expected to get 11 to 12 inches of snow today and tomorrow. So I have a feeling the temperature and the climate is a little bit different from where you are, from where I am, I should say. So anyway, welcome back from Vegas. I'm glad you had a good time out there with family and friends. So let's just start off. I've gotten to know a little bit about you. I've been following you on Facebook and social media. We've talked on the phone prior to this interview today. Reading your book, I got an insight on kind of how your brain works and how you work with your clients. But if you can share with us a little bit about you, where you're from, your childhood, whatever you want to share. What or who inspired you growing up?
That's a pretty loaded question.
I like that question.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin because it's so heavy. My story really starts when I was younger. I talk about this in my book, but, I had failed 2 suicide attempts at 14. And so it was at that point where I thought, you're like, okay, I can't do anything right, even kill myself. Great. And I just kind of had this moment where I just felt like such a prisoner. And I just said, okay, God, if I have to be here, what do you want from me?
I love that question. I remember that in the book.
And so that was kind of like the start. So when people have kind of an awakening or a rebirth or like this is when I switched my life over or whatever. Mine was at 14. It was very young. I was raised Mormon, but that did not resonate. So I kind of fell into a more spiritual path. At that time, I was like, okay, I have to be here, right? And shortly after that, I actually ended up working with an herbalist who helped me to heal from my eating disorder. And she gave me a book that I also recommend people called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And it was written, I believe, in like 1920 or 22, something like that. And you could read it literally in like an hour. It's so simple. And it's essentially like a metaphysical translation of the Bible. And Florence Scovel-Shinn was the author, and she really puts into perspective, like, gives you a framework of which to deal with life. And so that was like my first real set of principles. I mean, they talk about law of attraction that became popular in the early 2000s, but really, like, I was way already into it, and honestly, that when The Secret came out, I was not impressed at all. I didn't think it really encompassed a lot of the nuance behind LOA. So I just started following that, and manifesting was like my first real thing, you know what I mean? Like, and it's funny because when people jump on, the law of attraction bandwagon, like, manifesting is kind of a 101. And it's like, yeah, I miss those days. I have since run into like different, universal principles and how they operate and how they work. And my book really is a how-to break down universal principles in a way that's tangible, because I think people get really frustrated when they're trying to maneuver through life and it's just, they're like, oh, I thought it would be like this, or it should be this easier, or I'm not getting the results I want, or whatever. And so I really break down, like, this is what you can expect when you go to create change. It's messy, it's awful, and if it looks like things aren't working, it's working, because that's just kind of the illusion that you have to go through to get to the other side. A lot of people confuse, for example, the process with the outcome. And so as a coach now, that's what I do. I help people through those hiccups, right? Like, and call them out on their own ego stuff. And so I've dedicated my life to this work. I could give you the staples. I graduated from UNLV with a degree in business. I went into nightclubs, and I worked, the nightclub industry for many years in my 20s. I published a pole dancing magazine, managed a pole dancer.
Like a world-class pole dancer too, right?
What's that?
There was a world-class pole dancer, wasn't it? Wasn't she?
She had so much. Yeah, so she only had there was only one person who really was her competition, and she was out of Australia. So we're talking Janine Butterfly and Felix Kane, and I managed Janine, and I became really good friends with her, actually. And so it was because of that friendship that my entire, like, literal, my entrepreneur career was launched, actually. Managing her tour, going with her to South Africa, then building the pole dancing magazine, and eventually putting her on the cover at one point. And so, it's just funny how life turns out. And that was birthed as me just really wanting to give this industry the credibility it deserved, to break stereotypes and, empower women, especially. I mean, there's men too, but it was about 99% women. And so I did that, and then during that time, like, I practiced yoga since 1998. My own yoga career was taking off as I was just pumping out videos just for fun of my practice. And the next thing I know, I'm being invited to teach all over the world. And because I got to, and I practice Ashtanga yoga. And there's levels, there's series to Ashtanga yoga. And I did complete the 4th series, which about, less than 1% will do internationally. And so when you get to that level, you just automatically get seen, noticed, and acknowledged, and people want to learn from you. So that happened. And I taught all over the world. And it's funny because I have a friend who says, maybe he stole this from somewhere else. So I'm not trying to not give credit where it's due, but I heard it from my friend, and he said, you find a job, but a career finds you. Mm-hmm. And so when you really invest in who you are and things that you love, your work will find you. And it was definitely the case with me. So, And then, I was coaching simultaneously, and coaching is really what I love, because I just love seeing people experience stuff that they never thought they would.
Well, I'm going to include the book. I just ordered that book you recommended, the book Game of Life and How to Play It. I'm going to include that on the show notes, link to that so people can look at that book too. I was really impressed by that. You sent me a YouTube video of you. I guess that's a form of yoga that you were doing. And there were things that I was watching going, how in the hell does a human being do that? I mean, the way you balance on your arms and I'm going to throw that on Facebook and social media this afternoon or tomorrow to let people know the kind of person that, I think that takes more than just physical ability to do that. That takes an incredible mental strength and fortitude to be able to have that type of body control, balance, and strength. So I'm going to throw that in there because I think that really kind of gives an insight to who you are. And I love your words as you're doing it. I think it's the preface to your book, which I told you earlier. I think that was so powerful. And so, folks, when you buy her book, which I'm going to heavily recommend, the preface is obviously the beginning of the book, and you read it, you're going. So I asked her, I said, "Did you write that?" And she said, "Yeah, it's very, very powerful. It's like 3 pages long, and I got that highlighted." I want to go off on a tangent, other than just going down my standard questions today, Paige. Can you talk on manifestation? Because I have heard, when I talk to my guests that are on here, and of course all my guests, or the vast majority, are highly accomplished people in some form or some industry or career, and off air quite often they tell me that they manifest, and they might not use that term, but most of them do some form of it. I started doing it not long ago. In fact, I'm going through Victoria Gallagher, I think her name is, has a 21-day manifestation workshop that I'm going through right now online. Can you talk on manifestation? If I'm out there and saying, what does she mean? Or I've heard the term, I don't understand it. Can you give a definition and just go on whatever you want as far as how you want to explain manifestation and the benefit of it?
Gosh, again, another loaded question. So, there's levels to manifesting, and in my book, I talk about it from the perspective of, I talk about law of attraction and karma, and they're the same thing, essentially. So my background, it comes from obviously studying metaphysics and quantum physics, and then yoga, the sutras, and the Vedas and things. And, in the yoga tradition, we talk about karma and we talk about dharma. My business is called the Dharmic Path. Karma is essentially the unconscious patterns that we just continue to play into. As a coach, my job is to help you recognize those karmic patterns and break them. Dharma would be to step into the actions necessary for right action and for, essentially living a life that's congruent with what your soul is here to do. And, so manifesting can happen on an egoic level, it can happen on a soul level. And what I have found is most people who manifest from the egoic level, like I want a fancy car, for example, they end up being really disappointed. And so, I basically teach to manifest from the soul level, because when you manifest from the soul level, you're gonna be healing the wound that's driving the desire and creating something that may or may not have been what you thought you needed. And so it's about bringing in the experiences that will repair the karmic pattern. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a much deeper level. When I started out manifesting, it really was, I want an Audi TT, and that's it. And just manifested.
Well, that's what everybody thinks when they read The Secret or watch The Secret documentary. That's what they get out of it, I think, I watched The Secret documentary too.
And so, now that I've lived this life, I have the mundane, which most people exist on the mundane level. They're very unconscious. They're totally not tapping into their personal power. I've lived, I just turned, long enough. I am so embarrassed to say I'm in my 40s now, but whatever. So at 14, you see, like, most of my life has been a very conscious life. So that's the mundane for me, is to be highly conscious, right? And so as I've experienced getting what I want and being disappointed by it, that's a whole new level of the creative process. And so, yeah, when it comes to manifesting, like I said, there's this kind of mundane, materialistic, egoic framework, and then there's the deeper, the soul. What experiences am I looking to create so that I feel congruent with, my healing? And I had a moment actually right after it was actually 2 weeks before my brother died. And I was so burnt out. This was in 2012. I was so burnt out. And I just had this moment where I felt like I was not, like I'm building these things. And it's very materialistic, but I just felt this emptiness inside. And I was meditating, and I just had this moment where it just was very clear to me that I will absolutely have the experiences necessary for the healing of my soul, and to not worry about those experiences. As long as I stay authentic and in integrity, the experiences will find me. And so I didn't have to, because I was like in my early 30s then, and I'm like, oh God, or maybe I was in my late 20s turning 30, but you hit that first real hit of I haven't created what I want. And so and I just remember thinking, what if it doesn't happen? And just having that fear, right? And then that was the message I got, was that as long as you are living a life of integrity and being honest and authentic to yourself, then those experiences have to come through.
So when you, for the audience out there who's trying to understand manifestation, so you're describing two types: goal level, which is I want that Audi, I want that house, I want this money, that type, versus soul level. And soul level is really that manifesting the experiences that will find you based on, as long as you stay authentic and true to yourself and practice integrity. So being open to those experiences, really not trying to manifest a specific experience, but as long as you stay authentic and honest and live with integrity, the right experiences will find you. Is that, be open to them?
Absolutely. And so there's the visualization aspect of it, and then there's the action part. I think people get lost on the action part, or they get too hung up on the action part and not enough on the trust and visualization part. And again, that's either, it's either the soul level or even just the egoic level, of trying to create the life that we want. And I just found that the more conscious you become, when you go to manifest, your higher self is going to be like, that's not really congruent with where we're headed. And so you don't always get the material part of it. Or sometimes you get the better material part of it. Like there was a situation, I think I use this example in my book, where I really wanted to work at this new nightclub. I think I'm 25, and I really wanted to work at this new nightclub. It was supposed to be the hottest thing ever. And I became acquaintances with the owner so that I could, have him juice me in, because these are all juice positions. And he did, and he set me up. I was supposed to go work. It was LAX in Vegas. And at the last minute, the other owner said, no, I want her at Pure. And I was like, no, I was devastated, because I was like, I want it to be the new hotspot. Little did I know that hotspot never took off. And the place they put me was the flagship that never sunk. And so sometimes we end up in situations like we had a pointed vision of where we think we're supposed to be. But what's really better for us, we can't see it or understand it, or maybe we think it's not good, but because we're clear on the bigger goal, right? Like we think, okay, I want to make, at the time it was $12,000 a month. I want to make $12,000 a month, and I know I can do this at this nightclub. My higher self's like, no, you can't do it at that nightclub because that's about to bomb. So we're going to send you to this other nightclub instead. And I didn't see it at that moment, right? I just kind of had this assumption. And, spirit, or my higher self, whatever you want to call it, was just intervened and was like, if your goal is this, we're putting you here instead.
Well, don't you think, Paige? And as you were talking, I was thinking of like the goal level of manifestation thoughts. Really, when we want that money, that house, that car, whatever it might be, we really want the experience that we think is going to come with that. And so that's why I think so often when people become wealthy or get the car, hedonistic adaptation kicks in, or hedonic adaptation, I think it's called, where after a while, you're not any happier than you were prior to buying the house or the car or getting the money. You're really looking for an experience. So I think what I'm hearing is this kind of this soul level manifestation is really going right for the experience that's best for you, because and then that's what you're really after. I don't think we really want money or a car or a house. Those are just ways to get to some feeling we want inside of our souls: happiness, respect, love, understanding, whatever it might be. So that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that when you just do the soul level manifestation and being open, and like you said, practicing integrity and being honest to yourself and authentic, then the right experiences will find you. And that's really what we're all after, is the right experiences in life, not necessarily the objects that we think are going to get us there. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And that's why, as a coach, I work from the framework I do. That's why I said I call it the Dharmic path. Because when someone has a goal, we get their motivations behind it to see, okay, well, what's really this about? Like, because if it's to, a lot of people are trying to manifest because they're honestly, and this is what the number one thing I come across, especially with high achievers, is they're not moving towards something because they think it will fulfill them. They're moving away from their own inadequacy. And so that's a lot of what the work is that we do, is trying to get the core. Okay, what is really, why do you want that car? Why do you want that house? What does that say? What does that do? Because people do that. They'll create it. And here's the problem. If you're not congruent with what's happening on a deeper level, you'll sabotage it. And so there's no point. Like, you see people do this all the time. They get what they want and they destroy it. Mm-hmm. And so this is why, it's really important to get the software and be like, okay, what's really motivating this? Because you don't want to sabotage it. And again, like, I also break down, the fact that we live in 3D. We live on the karmic plane. Why do we not get what we want immediately? Well, we don't live in 5 or 6D. We live in 3D. So you gotta account for the fact that, like, it takes 9 months to have a baby. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to see seeds sprouting in winter. Like, there's that nuance as well. And I help people understand that part. And, the other thing about manifesting, and again, this just goes back to gutting their software. Like, I don't know how many times I've come across someone who's like, oh, I want a healthy relationship, but they're miserable. They don't have the skill set to manage one. So that's part of manifesting too. You get obviously who you want at what you want. So if you're not capable of manifesting healthy, you're going to continue to attract garbage until you learn how to navigate it.
So I want to stop, and I just want to point what you said out to the Bamboo Pack audience, because I think that was an incredibly profound statement that it took me years and years and years to learn, and I'm still learning it and still making mistakes in that area. And that is, you get who you are, not what you want. And I think that's so, so powerful, because I know for a fact, Paige, as you were talking, I was thinking of back when I was in my late 20s and working for a Fortune 200 company. The vice president pulled me in his office, and his words were, "I have big plans for you, but you're fucking it up."
Right.
This is where I was taking notes, so I actually still have the notes. He said, every time you have a huge success, you self-implode. You do something stupid the next day or the next week or shortly thereafter. And it didn't really set in with me at that time what he was saying, but he was saying exactly that. I was getting who I was, not necessarily what I want. I had to reframe, as you said, I had to gut my own software over time to realize that I wanted these things, but I wasn't getting them because that wasn't who I was. And that's what this idea of manifestation has been helping me with a lot more so. I'm really new at this higher level manifestation. I'm only a few months into it, but I'm already noticing some big changes in my life, more just in how I feel and how I'm connecting with my true inner self versus, I always think there was a disconnect between my I'm going to call it my soul, who I was inside and who I represented on the outside. And they're starting to come together, and I'm starting to actually like who I am and like who I see in the mirror now. And that's a big change for me. So I think the work you're doing, and your book has been a next level jump for me as I'm reading through it. I know when I'm done, I'll read through it again. I'm going to read something from your book, and I want to talk about frequency with you because so in her book, this is on page 95 of my copy, she said, frequency does not discriminate. Frequency is not invested in success or failure. You are. Once you change what you vibe, what you attract will change too. You have to break up with the vibration if you don't like it. Can you talk a little bit on vibration and just kind of frequency, vibration, whatever you want to call it, and kind of explain that to the audience?
So I was going to also add that, like, people think, I get this all the time with coaching clients who are like on the fence. They're like, well, when my circumstances change, and I'm like, you are your circumstances. Like, your circumstances are a reflection of you, not the other way around. So as long as you put the cart before the horse, nothing's going to shift. Nothing. You'll just keep pushing it off because you assume the circumstances are what's causing you to stay stuck when actually you're projecting the circumstances. That's a big paradigm shift for a lot of people, and a lot of people aren't ready to make that. They want to give their power away to their circumstances and play the victim. But to answer the other question about frequency, which is, same thing essentially. The way that I understand it, or the way that it came through to me, was like, vibration are the notes on the scale and the frequency is the scale. It's like we hit different notes during the day where maybe we wake up in a good mood and then we hit traffic and that annoys us. And then we find out something good at work and then we get bad news when we come home. And it's like just up and down. Like those are kind of the notes, right? Where you vibe generally as a combination of those would be like the frequency, and this is essentially, again, what creates the circumstances or the environment that we're in. And it doesn't discriminate. And see, for me, I personally was hung up on certain beliefs where I was like, oh, but I'm different, or, oh, but like everyone else but me. And I had to swallow a hard pill around the fact that, like, you are no different. You are the sum of the molecular structure that makes up everything in this universe. And until you see that, you are going to pretend that you are somehow separate, somehow unique, somehow different, and therefore you will stay stuck. And so I had to, when I was breaking up with certain patterns as an entrepreneur, because I just felt like, well, what if no one wants what I'm offering as an entrepreneur? And so that was a fear of mine because I grew up with a lot of rejection patterns. And so I had to just go, nope. Frequency doesn't discriminate. Energy does not discriminate. Like, energy goes where it's called. So if I'm calling in victimization, I'll just get more events and things that will mirror that victimization. But as long as I remind myself that all my needs are met and that I am wanted, that I have something of value to give, then that's what I'm going to be bringing in. And, because again, like, universe doesn't care. Like these are the molecules that make up everything in our universe doesn't have an ego. It just flows. We have egos, but this energetic aspect of life does not have an ego. And so, you could use any example. You could use it as a collective. Like, I've seen it happen personally. I've seen it happen collectively. If we look at what's happening in the world, with discriminatory patterns. And it's not to say that you're not going to find what your belief is. You will absolutely be able to validate whatever your belief is. It doesn't matter. Right? If you think that, like, people hate you for being female or, being Asian, then you're going to find it. Right. Absolutely. It's that you choose that framework. And this is a really interesting one as well, because, like, I'm a female, I'm an entrepreneur, and I come across so many women who are just like, I have to fight against men. And it's so totally not part of my experience. I had a father who was my biggest supporter, and all my business partners have been men until now. And I'm just like, oh, I never had any walls as an entrepreneur, not even from men. Like, I'm not to say that I didn't deal with, like, some nuance here and there that was annoying, but I just chalked that up to personality and I just kept moving. But again, like, if you decide that life is going to be hard on you because of X, Y, and Z, you'll find it. Absolutely. And so, it's about recognizing like what pattern do I want to reap the benefits of?
Okay. And
then you set your intention there and you commit to that. And then of course there's the visceral aspect of it, which is why I, as a coach, I get, I help people and I handhold, because it's like the visceral part is where most people get stuck.
Can you explain that a little bit for the audience, the visceral part?
So, changing your mind is one thing, but if you have software that's locked in and it's saying, for example, we'll take victimization. If you're like, I'm just going to take back my power and not be a victim anymore. That's on the mind level. Well, the body has a whole other agenda because the body has lived with victimization. And so now we get to break a power struggle within the self, and as you're breaking that pattern, what happens is you're actually going to attract more situations of victimization to you. And that's when the mind goes, see, this is my reality. You feel stuck. When actually what's happening is as you're shifting out, it's kicking up the old debris.
Ooh, okay.
And so it's your job to just override that and stay conscious and go, I knew this was coming, but I am done with this pattern. I knew this was coming, but I am done with this pattern. I'm not identifying with it. And because our state of being, and Joe Dispenza does a really great job of explaining this, our state of being is wired for certain experiences. And once we go to break up with that, our cell receptors are going to look for certain experiences to validate that pain point. And so once we give it up, it's like a chemical withdrawal or a drug withdrawal. You know what I mean? You're going to go through that viscerally. And I see it a lot with people who are dealing with, especially with people who are dealing with narcissistic patterns. So for example, like if you're struggling with a boss or a colleague who's a total narcissist and you're caught in that power struggle, that's a big one. And people, they get physiologically addicted to the power struggle. And so you have to be willing to go through the withdrawals in order to actually override the pattern. And that's where the conscious will comes in. And you have to want the other reality more than the current fix. And that's a hard one. Like I had a psychosomatic disorder at one time, and I was very much addicted to my own pain. And I was like, oh crap, I'm going to be fat if I don't cut this out. Because I was swelling, like it was causing swelling in my body. And I was like, my vanity overrode the addictive pattern. I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. If it means that I'm going to swell, no, we're going to cut this out now. I will not be fat.
Well,
so you have to want the other reality more to break up. And again, I just get this all the time with people like, oh, once this changes, then I will. But
right.
You're the reason it's not changing.
Right. Yeah, and I think, do you think, Paige, with the last 3 years of our country, I'm going to say since March of 2020 when the COVID hit and we were locked down, quarantined, do you think that I'll just ask you, open-ended, what kind of impact has that had on people in their mindset as far as maybe you can stick with even victimhood? Do you think it's enhanced the victimhood nature of our country and the people, or the world really for that matter, and make people feel like that they are a victim and they've kind of got stuck in that rut and they're thinking more on the visceral level, or they're thinking more on the intellectual level versus the visceral?
I would say we're definitely in a collective power struggle, 100%. And, COVID hit people differently. Some people actually woke up to their true, selves during that. They left these horrible corporate positions where they weren't getting the validation they wanted. Some people, it was really inspiring for them. Other people, I would say, myself included, it caused a lot of trauma.
Okay.
And I don't know that people have really worked through that. I spend a lot of time actually just observing trends. And so on different social media apparatuses, I will just go and scroll, like, what is trending? Get my thumb on the pulse of the collective to kind of see what the themes are. And there's a lot of people who actually feel, for me, the word was apathy. And so being stuck in a very apathetic place where, like, you're not seeking joy, you're not motivated. And I think that was a lot of the what happened with COVID, because it happened for so long. It's one thing if it were just the 2 weeks, but it wasn't. And when something goes on long enough, it wears you down. And so you get to the point of submission where your habits or your natural default settings just get totally pushed down. And so your capacity to be like, oh, it'll be fine today, it gets hampered. And after a while, you're just like, now you're just a zombie, right? So I think that for a lot of people, that's kind of what happened. And again, survival mode, like what became your go-to for survival mode. And I think a lot of people are still stuck there. I know for me, I had to fight my way out. It wasn't like, because I'm a coach and I have awareness, that all of a sudden like it was easier for me. No, I traveled for a living, and that was all shut down. Right. And I teach people how to take big risk. And now we can't even leave the house without mask on. Like, who am I to teach you to take a big risk when like you're not even allowed to leave the house without this thing on your face? So I felt completely like stuck in terms of like, well, where's my influence at this point? And I didn't fight it. I know better than to try to fight. I have fought my way through other things in my life, but this one was too big. This one was like, I need to kind of let go of the reins and let things kind of just take their natural course. And getting back to a baseline for myself, because I took a year off on purpose from all work. And so it was not just like bouncing back. No, I had to really work through some of that trauma and find a reason to show up anyway.
Right. I want to ask you in a minute to talk a little bit about the project with Sabrina. So folks, if you don't know, Paige is really close friends with Sabrina Tashany, who was a guest on the podcast a few weeks ago. And that's how I was introduced to Paige. So they have a project going. We'll talk about it in just a minute. But I want to ask you, talked about trauma. Paige, I want to ask you a question that I ask every guest. And I tell every guest, you can refuse to answer. That's fine. But if you answer, or if you're interested, I'd like to know, what is the most difficult thing you've ever gone through? And how did you overcome it? What skill set, what tools did you use to overcome that challenge?
Gosh, I was assaulted by my former business partner at one point. My brother died of heroin in 2012. And I've definitely been through some stuff, but I would say, honestly, the hardest thing that I overcame was actually my psychosomatic disorder. Okay. Like breaking up with my emotional pain. That was the hardest thing that I had to learn to do. It was the most eye-opening and the most liberating, but it was also the hardest. And it's just now gaining traction, the term emotional addiction. Came across a TikTok, and the girl made a video. She didn't label it that, but you could tell that's what it was. And I just commented, and I said, emotional addiction is the hardest thing to overcome. And thousands of comments like, what is that? And so emotional addiction is essentially where you don't have the capacity to override or disrupt the connection between the mind and the body. So people who are addicted to despair, depression, anxiety, and this governs their life now. And it literally is just an addiction, just like anything else, like alcohol, heroin, because you don't know how to exist without this pain. And I was literally tired of it. I was like, I'm done, and I'm walking away from it. And that's what happened, was my body blew up. And my body was like, we're not done. And that just pulled me right back into the despair, because I just thought, well, crap, like now I really feel trapped. And I have a reason to feel trapped. And then on top of that, I ended up developing this horrific pain in my right leg, which was like the most bizarre thing. So I'm going to all these doctors trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And they're basically calling me crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. We can't diagnose anything. It's all in your head. Which didn't make me feel any better. No. But I literally just had it was like, why did I do this? And I knew I had created it, right? Because I remember the moment where I was like, I'm done with my pain. I'm not doing this anymore. And then again, I literally woke up I think a week later, just swelling in my body and pain. And so then it was August of 2005. I got fired from my job because I couldn't stop crying. I was in so much pain all day long. And when she went to fire me, I was like, I'm surprised you didn't fire me earlier. Like, I was like, oh crap, why did you let me stay so long? I've been useless for months. But, and I had practiced a form of healing called theta healing. I learned about it in the early 2000s, and I practiced it. I'm actually very psychic. I even predicted my sister's kids. Like, literally, I could describe the way they looked, and I ended up being 100% accurate. She couldn't conceive. She took her 7 years, and I saw them before they were born. And so I learned a lot, and I thought, okay, I need to talk to Diana.
Hi, Amy. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, sorry, your website just popped up, and you started talking.
Oh,
I have the Dharmic Path. I have the Dharmic Path on my website here, or on my computer, and it just somebody started talking. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So I thought I need to talk to the creator of Theta Healing, the woman who brought this to humanity. I need to get on the phone with her because I don't know anyone else who can kind of help me figure out what's wrong. So her daughter was able to patch me through to her, and she doesn't normally do that, but I was pretty desperate. And so this is a lovely lady, by the way, just a lovely healer. And she goes, what do you want more than anything? And I said, freedom. And she goes, what would that look like to you? And I was stumped. I said, I don't know. She goes, how about total, like I always want to cry saying this. She goes, how about total accountability and responsibility? And I was like, okay. And 2 months later, I was like, okay, God, I'm ready. I said, if I am connected to everything in this universe, I'm not just connected to this problem, I am connected to this solution. And if there is a way through, I need you to show me what that looks like, and I will absolutely take those steps. And that's what surrender is, by the way. It's not apathetic. It's not passive. It's 100% active. And so literally, like the next day, I was like, I'm going to go get this book on this diver who became paralyzed. And I'm going to Barnes & Noble. Couldn't find that book, but right in front of me was staring me in the face, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I'd already read it once. And so, but it just kept, like, really was getting my attention. So I thought, okay, I'm going to read it. And it was reading this book. And like, Eckhart Tolle is so ethereal. It's so hard to extract some of his stuff and let alone apply it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when I was reading his book, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I am not my feelings and my thoughts. You mean there's something, like, I exist beyond this framework? And again, that was the most liberating thing I could have understood. And I remember when it hit me and the anger that came out, because I realized I created all of it. And so I was like, wow, like, not only am I like totally free from this, but at the same time, I created this trap I'm in. Right. And so then I realized it was my job to no longer identify with the physical pain as well as the emotional pain. And that was, I mean, we're talking like moment to moment, breaking up with pain. And I wanted to cry all day, every day. And I had to start observing my pain and not identifying with it, which people get confused even in that process. And within 6 months, the pain in my leg was gone. And I thought, okay, I was right. And when people are making changes, they kind of assume that they have to be implemented like fully in order to see a shift in their life, when really changes will come as soon as you commit to it. Like, once you've made the decision, you commit, you can start seeing changes immediately. And so it was really just about making the commitment, and my life kind of took on a new trajectory after that. The work wasn't done, and it took 2 years to really break up with the emotional pattern. That's how deeply ingrained it was in me. And I tell people, because I'm like, yeah, well, it wasn't just the despair. Like, I got really good at like noticing when the despair would want to show up and not going there. But then the ego, and I define ego as anything that we can kind of identify with, really. My body was like, oh, she's not falling for the straight despair, so we're going to trick her. And so it would, like anger would kick up. And I would think, well, anger is a safe emotion, except it was really just a backdoor to despair.
Okay.
And so I was telling Sabrina this at one point because she's working through some stuff. And I said, honestly, Sabrina, for a good 2 years, absolutely every emotion was not safe. I couldn't trust myself to not slip through that despair point. So annoyance, irritation, anger, like none of it was safe. I had to be observant and objective with all of it until I created enough distance. And it probably took, this was 2005 when I started the process. I would say around the time of my brother's death, I was still asking the question in 2012, is it safe for me to give into my grief? Because I just was like that nervous that if I gave into that pain pattern, that it would come back. And I really didn't want to have that power struggle anymore. And luckily there was enough distance, and grief is it was a whole different thing. And if grief is not processed, it'll trail you. But yeah, so it's not the thing that most people get caught up in when it comes to change or creating a life they desire is that they think if they just do it once, then they're safe and they don't have to do it ever again. When the reality is success is a habit. It's multiple habits, and it's like brushing your teeth. You don't do it once. And I say this in my book, you don't do it once and then go, I never have to brush my teeth again. You do it daily. And so success is really committing to a certain set of habits that'll continue to express what you want as opposed to something you don't want. And so I've had to make a commitment. I don't get to go back and be like, oh, I just feel like a victim today. I have to be like, okay, there it is. I see it, but we're not going there. You know what I mean? I have to be very committed to those habits. And so people who are stuck in emotional addiction, I see it constantly. And it's any drug addict has emotional addiction. And, it's really just the drug becomes the thing that they go to as a distraction from the emotion. But if you were to take away the drug, now what are they dealing with? The emotional addiction. And so it's for me, I don't believe in medicating. I had every reason to be medicated, but I wanted that power within me. I wanted to be able to choose my emotional state. And now I can honestly say I'm in full control of my emotional state.
Yeah, I just want to stop for a minute because I want to, as you were talking, I'm taking notes here, Paige, and I want to share with the audience because I think so many people come on this podcast. They try it out for the first time. Maybe they're going through some emotional pain. They're going through a challenge in life. And I just want to recap Paige's story. So take your struggles that you've gone through, and maybe like myself, but I learned this yesterday in a podcast with Dr. Fred Luskin out of Stanford University as we were talking, that I still carry some victimhood in my mindset that I thought I had eradicated. But after talking with him on the subject of forgiveness and humility and gratitude, I realized I still think of myself as a goddamn victim, and that's my next journey is to explore that more and hopefully eradicate that out of me. But I think we all carry a lot of that with us. But I want you in the audience to take your story. Don't compare it to Paige's, but put it alongside of it and walk alongside her journey within your own journey. 2 failed suicide attempts at the age of 14. She lost her brother to heroin in 2012. She was assaulted by her former business partner, had a psychosomatic disorder. That's a lot of shit to go through.
Yeah.
It is, man. And I want you, the audience, to now look at Paige right now. Listen to the woman you're hearing. And when you read her book, explore her website, just look at where she's come from. So, and I think so many people, and we all do this at times in our life, but so many people get locked into that position they're in, that current challenge, that pain they're feeling, and think, I can't ever get out of here. And it's stories like Paige's and her experience and her walking alongside and her hearing her journey that make you realize, hell, I can do that. And I think that's the real power in what you're offering, Paige, is you didn't have this perfect life, which none of us do, but you've gone through a lot of traumatic stuff. And here you are now. So I'm going to ask you, are you happy? It's a loaded question, I know.
Am I happy? I would say I'm content.
Okay.
Yeah. I think happy is a little bit more elusive. It's like it comes and goes. But contentment is something you can choose into every day. In fact, it's one of the I think it's either one of the, it's been a while since I practiced yoga. One of the yamas or the niyamas, one of the ethical principles of the yogic code, which basically is contentment says, it's basically like a step up from gratitude, where it's like the moment's complete. In this moment, everything is complete, and choosing into the fact that in this moment, everything is complete, instead of choosing into the constant lack, but actually practicing gratitude and being content.
I like that. I like that a lot. I had a friend of mine this morning out of Dallas, Texas, it was actually a friend of mine out of East Grand Rapids. He texted me. I just said, how's life? He said, going well. I'm getting a haircut today. I took today off. And he just asked me the question, are you happy? I said, getting happier every day. That's what I said. But I love the word. I like the idea of contentment, because happiness is a up and down, moment by moment type of a feeling or emotion. But contentment is something I can choose. And I think what you're saying is a lot of times we get that through gratitude. We had my guest that we had on this week. Another guest talked about the concept of forgiveness as being an incredibly important tool for our mindset and our soul. And he said, really to be a person who practices forgiveness, you have to have gratitude and humility. And you said it earlier, and you talked about humility, but you had said I realized I wasn't the only one going through this, and that's what he said humility really is. When we play this role of victimhood, and he said the first thing we have to admit is I'm not the only one that's going through this. Millions of people have gone through the same thing, and really, he said that the universe doesn't give a shit. Kind of like what you said, doesn't matter. It doesn't care.
No, there's no agenda outside of the one our own ego has. What do you want that agenda to look like?
I love when you were talking in the first chapter, I think it was on ego and something else. I had a hard time. You said that was the most difficult chapter you wrote was your first chapter. I had a difficult time absorbing, and it was, I read it again. I'm like, okay, now I get what the ego truly is. And the ego is, for me, it's that part of me that's trying to keep me exactly who I am and not allowing me to grow and become a better version of myself. And that really kind of opened up a lot of things. And I've been thinking about that idea of my ego over the past couple of weeks. I'm going to ask you a question. I love this question, Paige. And I don't know what time frame of life you want to go back to, but if I were to go down to Myrtle Beach today, Fort Lauderdale, right?
Yeah, that's where I live.
Okay. I talked to a client today about Myrtle Beach. That's what was in my mind. If I were to fly down there today and bring my time machine, and we were going to go back to some point in your life, maybe it was that 14-year-old girl, maybe it's you in your early 20s, doesn't matter. We were going to sit down and you were going to talk to your younger, former self. What words of wisdom would you share with her?
Yeah, I would say, love yourself anyway. I have found as a practice, the most powerful practice that anyone could integrate is self-love. Because self-love is talking about egoic patterns, talking about karmic patterns. You want to dissolve those faster, practice self-love.
If I'm out in the audience right now and I say, I love the concept of self-love, but what would be a couple of things I could do starting today to practice self-love? Any initial thoughts on that?
It's funny because I get a lot of resistance with clients, and they're like, well, if I start loving myself, I won't be so motivated. It's like... and it's like, okay, I get that. I know what you're talking about, because the ego will try to convince you of that. Because again, every time you go to make a shift, even on the egoic level, there's that has to, the energy doesn't die. It just gets, there's an alchemical process and it just transforms. But essentially that egoic identity has to die. And so, yeah, it's like, no, you can't take away my pain. You can't take away my motivator. and I hear those echoes from the ego when this comes up. But self-love is really, in my book, I talk about like the disintegrated parts of ourselves are dark. And if you're trying to manifest, we always manifest from the dark parts before the light ones. It's like, oh, you want a healthy relationship? Well, let's look at that anger pattern first, okay, and so we don't get the great relationship. We get the anger pattern coming out to look at, right? So we always tend to manifest the darker aspects of us first, the denser parts. And then, the more congruent parts of ourselves. But self-love is really about taking the things that we have decided are unworthy or unlovable and embracing them as they are. We're not changing them. We're not fixing them. We are just saying, yes, I am imperfect. And yes, I have these flaws. And yes, I have failed, and loving all of that. And that's where you become the most powerful. You know, people talk about not wanting to be a target. Okay, love yourself. You're not a target when someone loves you. That their arrows will go right through you. And so, you know, people will talk about protecting themselves or defending themselves. Nah, just love yourself. No one can harm you when you're loving yourself.
I think the word you use in the book is you become impenetrable.
Yeah.
I thought that was really powerful. Now, do you feel, and I think you allude to this in the book, or you share this, you at this point in your life feel that way, don't you?
Yeah. And it's funny because the more you practice self-love, the more you are going to see everyone else's pain patterns. Like when you're invested in a pain pattern, it's like everything is kind of like in your sphere of like your daily reality. But then once you move out of that, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, he really hates himself. You just see everyone else's stuff so clearly, which makes it even easier to be objective.
Well, I hear a cat.
So, yeah, it's Charlie.
Charlie?
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine, Paige, and I've shared this on the podcast prior, that I was going through a fairly difficult challenge over the fall. My girlfriend and I had broken up, and I was, I'm an empty nester, living alone, and it was just an odd time for me. I would call it a dark time. And I had a client or a friend of mine from Vegas. She lives in Portland, Oregon now, but she texted me on a Sunday morning and just said, "What are you going to do for self-care or self-love this week?" And it hit me. Like, that's a really good question. I don't know. And actually, being me, I like lists and notes or like checklists. I started putting things down that I'm going to do on a daily basis to practice self-love, pragmatic things. And that's what I work off of every week. It helps me to live on a very conscious level. It's little things like how many times I'm going to, lift, I'm going to do strength exercises, how many times I'm going to stretch, how many times I'm going to call my mother, just little things, how much water I'm going to drink. A lot of it has to do with my physical and my intellectual and my spiritual development. But it really helped me to, like I said, I look in the mirror and I like myself a lot more than I ever have in my 56 years of living. And I think that had a lot to do with it. I like that a lot. I really like the idea that what you said earlier, you'll see the changes once you commit to the change. You'll start seeing some changes as soon as you commit to it. But success is a habit. You can't just do it one time, like brush your teeth one day and expect your teeth not to fall out. Success is a daily, moment-by-moment habit that we have to practice over and over. And I think the problem with so many people, and all of us, in fact, is that when we start a new habit, we start a new practice, we start self-love, we don't really see a lot of the benefits right away. Some of them they're happening underground, like a tree or a seed being blossoming. It spreads a root system under the ground, then it comes through the earth. And I think so many people want that instant reaction or that instant gratification from it. And it's the daily moment-by-moment habits that we put together and put in our lives that over time we get that point of that tipping point, if we continue, where life really becomes more beautiful in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like when you integrate these patterns, and make these shifts, like people want so badly to have the benefits of a conscious life while being asleep. And clients, their responses to the homework I give them, okay, well, if I do this once,
yeah. Like go to the gym one time and you're not going to gain a lot.
Like they really just want to put something in place and then go back. They're like, okay, can I just like stick this here and then go back to the same pattern? And no. This is the pattern we're changing. This thing, you get to do it from moment to moment moving on. It's not a one and done. Right. And so a lot of times, they'll read my book and they'll be like, I don't know how to do whatever. And I'm like, you do, you just don't want to commit to it regularly. And that's the hard part, is that like being a conscious person and having a life that you've just like really is your definition of success, and that's different for everybody. It requires showing up moment moment. There is no, like, I realized that when I was in my 20s and when I surrendered and was like, okay, God, I'll take responsibility for my psychosomatic disorder, and realized, oh, damn. Okay. So this is something I get to commit to all the time for the rest of my life. It's not like a one and done, yay, and I'm healed. And like, that's when it really started to occur to me and became more and more ingrained in me that it's not like these grand moments of surrender and shifting and rebirth. It's literally like every moment's a rebirth now. You're going to live on a whole new level. And that means you're conscious all the time.
Every moment is a rebirth. I think that's awesome. You know, I think when you're thinking of self-love, now you could speak to this much more than I can, but I find for me, Paige, is, you know, we go to the mirror every morning, we brush our teeth, we shave, we wash our face. You know, some people, I don't, but some people comb their hair. But do people ever really look in the mirror and look in their own eyes? I have found for me that this practicing of self-love lately, I now look in the mirror and I look in my own eyes every day. And I'm, you know, I don't know if people, at least I did, I avoided that for so many years. And I think the idea that I'm actually, like I said, I like myself now. Maybe I'm even starting to love myself, and I can look myself in the eye with a great deal more pride and satisfaction almost. And is that a sign of becoming more competent at self-love or practicing of self-love, is being able to look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and being happy with what the reflection that comes back at you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just, you brought up liking versus loving. And the thing is, when you're making changes in the self-love, you know, aspect of life, it's not about liking everything. Like, obviously, if I have a habit of, you know, eating too much dessert, I'm not going to like that to love myself. I love the fact that I'm imperfect and that I'm doing my best. But you can always work on habits. You don't have to like everything. And I mean, we hear that too, like with our loved ones. Like, I love my dad, but I don't always like what he does, right, you know, for instance. And so it's the same thing. And so we're always working for better. You know what I mean? To improve. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's why people get afraid of, like, well, if I love myself, I won't want to improve anymore. No, you'll want to improve more, actually, because what happens when you start integrating self-love is you automatically start making better choices.
Well, you probably
you're like, I don't want to poison my body, and I don't want to stay out late, and I don't want to actually subject myself to people that aren't good for me. And I you know what, I'm going to say no to this opportunity. It doesn't feel right, or I need my sleep, or, you know, one of the biggest cruxes of lack of boundaries is lack of self-love. People are so much more concerned with the approval than they are with nurturing themselves.
Well, do you think that when you practice self-love, you create those boundaries and you start making those better changes and habits, as you mentioned, because you finally realize that you deserve better? Is there an aspect of that, do you think, that you start to, hey, I deserve better because I actually love the person that looks back at me in the mirror, so I deserve to make better habits. I deserve to, you know, have boundaries on relationships or take care of my body or my mind better. Do you think that's part of the cause or part of it?
I'm not a huge fan of the word deserving, but...
Why did I know you were going to say that? I don't know why. Yeah. I couldn't think of a better word.
Right, because there's a measuring that goes on with deserving. Okay. But it's... I mean, I just caution people when I'm working with them about using that, because you're still kind of stuck in the ego part. Okay. But, you know, you're like, yeah, I'm good. You know what I mean? I don't know that it comes across as like, I deserve better or I'm worth more. Like, in the beginning stages, absolutely. Anytime anyone is learning anything, they're looking for parameters and rules and, you know, ways to stay in the lines. And so, yeah, I guess that language would be suitable to the beginner mind who's adjusting to a self-love process, but ultimately it becomes pretty automatic. Okay. You're not thinking about, like, you know, do I deserve this or not deserve this? It's just kind of an intuitive response. Like, I don't really like the way I'm feeling as a result of talking to this person, so I'm just not going to talk to them anymore. Okay. You know, it's more like that.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. I want you to talk on this project, and the website's up and running that you and Sabrina have together right now, Creating Through Connection. Can you share what the intent is for that, and what I'm going to include a link to that on the show notes today? Can you share a little bit about that?
So that is a subsidiary of my brand, The Dharmic Path, Creating Through Connection. And Sabrina and I have partnered up to build this out. Sabrina and I have known each other since junior high. So there's a history there. And, as I am coming out of my hiatus, it's like, okay, I have to rebuild my brand. I got to get my pipeline going and all this stuff. And, Sabrina just kind of wanted to jump on board with that and be a part of it. She's looking to create other things in her life that are a little bit more fulfilling as well. And so it's really like a community, primarily at this point where we're focusing on women, just because that's more our wheelhouse. But the coaching aspect of it, the consulting part of it, I'm obviously more on the personal side, the interpersonal side, whereas Sabrina really likes the business side of things. And so we are hosting, like I'm doing one-to-one coaching. She doesn't have time for that, but we're building out her group funnel, my group funnel. And then we want to eventually do events, and really create a network of women that can have support. Because as a result of COVID, I just felt like, where's the community? Where's the support? It's that got dismantled so badly. And I just feel like humanity's fractured at this point. And so I've never been one to join a community. In fact, my archetype doesn't really go well as a joiner or a group person. I've always been better as the leader. So I thought, well, we will just create one then. And so that's kind of what it's about, So if women are looking for that support, we'd love to have them. We're literally like the website is done. That's official. And I'm now working with a virtual assistant to build out the group funnel to actually start bringing women into just the online group. And they're more than welcome to have more, like if they do want to join a group coaching call, or if they want to, work one-to-one. They also have the option for the first year where we're going to have women highlighted on our website for free. If you want to put your virtual, business card up there, we will host it for free. You know what I mean? We really want to build out this network and community for women. So
it's a really cool website. I know you sent it to me, and so did Sabrina when it went live, and I've gone through it. It's really interesting. So I think I mentioned it to my daughter. I think she's either following or I think she'd like to get involved too. So folks, as we mentioned, Sabrina Tashini was a guest of mine on the podcast episode number 77 back on March 13th. So I think once you hear Paige, her speak today and her wisdom and story, and then go back, if you haven't, listen to Sabrina's. I mean, these are two of the most amazing women I've ever met, and have never met actually, but have met at least on phone call and podcast. I think you're going to realize what really these two together, whether or not Paige is actually a joiner or not, they joined together for this. It's going to be an incredible process, and I think I would recommend any woman to explore that. There will be a link to it on the show notes of today's podcast. So, Paige, I've got one more question before we wrap up, and it's kind of I call it the net question. It catches anything I might have missed. Is there any question that I didn't ask that you wish I would have, or is there any final message you want to leave with the Bamboo Pack audience?
My whole thing is about going rogue. That's kind of, we have that on the website under my bio, and I feel like too many people are caught up in like, what do I need to do to fit in, to fill the void, to meet the standard, or whatever it is. And, look, I also practice astrology. I have since, 2009. And what I find, we all have a unique thumbprint. We all have a unique astrological print, and our dharma is unique. And I just find that people who are willing and, find the courage within themselves to honor who they are. I mean, when you're honoring why you're on this earth, you're more likely to find that fulfillment. But when you're looking to just fit in, you're not going to be fulfilled, right? But you're going to find that security or that safety or that illusion of security and safety, but you're really not going to actually find, like when you die, like, did you do what you wanted to do? Right. It's a big question, right?
Exactly.
Like there's still things I wouldn't mind accomplishing in my life, but at the same time, like if I died tomorrow, like every step of the way was intentional. There was no part of me that was like, oh, I'd like to, but I'm just not going to. And so, it's really easy to conform, but really, like at the end of the day, again, when you pass away, what's your legacy? What is it that like really burns inside you? And it could be anything. And are you being true to that part? It's so easy to conform. And I'm meant to live with that regret. And I don't know. I just, like I said, I am definitely, on the extreme side of wanting to, honor that internal freedom. And I really would encourage other people to live their life that they think that is calling them.
It's so amazing as you were talking. So many of my guests who I have a great deal of respect for, you included, have shared a very similar message. And more so in the last couple of months, I've heard that message a lot from guests on the podcast. And I love that. I love the idea of going rogue. I think that's really powerful, and honor why you're on this earth. And I think so for so many of the Bamboo Pack members out there, why are you on this earth? I mean, that's the first, what is your legacy going to be? What do you want written? What do you want the world to know about you and to remember about you? And it shouldn't be the same necessarily as the person next to you. And it definitely shouldn't be the legacy that somebody else gave you. You have one shot at this and make it yours. I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. Paige, I think for what I took so many notes here, and you hit a nerve with me on quite a few things, which really means that I think it's going to hit a nerve with a lot of the audience, because I think so many of us right now are trying to find who we are. We're trying to, find the path that we want to be on, that we're, maybe that we feel we were destined to be on. Where so many people are living with blinders on right now, and they're looking in a linear way. They're looking straight forward, and that's it. They're not realizing there are so many other opportunities and options and sliding doors and opening windows and doors around us, that being open to that experience in life, I think, is so powerful. And I really loved what you said. I think I circled it twice with 2 circles. You get who you are, not what you want. That to me is a transformational phrase that so many of us can take right now and say, okay, I've been trying to get what I want, but overall I'm getting who I am. So who am I? And who do I want to become? And that's what you're going to get in life. So I just want to take the time. I know you're a busy person, and I know you probably have a beautiful day to go see the sun in the water, and we have snow and ice falling down here. But I know you took some time for us today, Paige, and this was a great interview. It was a great conversation. I really want to tell you how much I appreciate you being such an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to have you back on, especially as the project you and Sabrina have going. I'd like to get the both of you on sometime in the future to do a call with both of you at the same time. So hopefully you're open to that.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you. All right, Bamboo Pack. So Sabrina, Paige, if I could talk to you for a few minutes after we're done, that would be great. Bamboo Pack audience, I just want to take the time to thank you again for tuning in again this week. You're growing this podcast leaps and bounds, and I'm so happy that you're allowing me to come into your home, your car, your buds every week or every few days. So please get out there, everyone, man. Strive to be your best, the best version of yourself every day. Show love and respect to others and also to yourself, and live intentionally, man. Enjoy those moments out there. Live consciously. And remember, you get who you are, not what you want. Thank you all. We'll talk to you in a few days. In the meantime, just know how much I appreciate each and every one of you.